we do Columbus Can't Wait because we want to break down the barriers and we want to make politics accessible for the layman. Just the everyday person walking around Columbus and everything. Want people to have a better understanding of our political offices. We want people to have a better understanding of the people that are on the ballot so that they're not just voting on names or voting on the little letter next to the name. We want them to actually know who they are. And so, like, we do want you to just come on the show and come as you are and be yourself and all that jazz. So,
Word.
yeah, very no gotchas here. Except for the questions I'm gonna ask you about Kasi, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Rizzo, are we good? Are we golden? We might leave that in there. I think that was a good intro. You feel me? It's been a long time since I potted. That's crazy. Whatever.
Hi, Brandon.
You wanna bring it in? Were you bringing
No,
it
I
in?
just said hi.
Oh.
Are we recording now?
Yeah, we just it's real.
okay.
We've been recording actually.
Oh, I didn't realize.
You see
that.
how natural it is?
Yeah, that was very natural.
Yeah. It got the star effect on it. You feel me?
Yeah.
I'm
Me.
just teasing, man.
It's me.
Am I supposed to say hello back, or was I supposed to say hello back?
No.
Okay,
I was. That's a centennial joke and everything. For the listeners, we have a very special guest on for this episode. I have a candidate that is running. Actually, is he the youngest person that we've had thus far? For this season, has
for
to
this
be.
season, yes.
So we have, excuse me. This whole season has been all about like people that are running for local offices and all of that. And we have Brandon Simmons here joining us. You are running for a seat on the Columbus School Board and everything. And I think that is. I'm glad that we chose to, dive into the school board because I think that that's one of those like government entities, those bodies here in Central Ohio that people know exist, but they don't really know much about it. We've talked a little bit about it earlier this season. We had some other people that are on it, but this is the first time that we have somebody that is aspiring to be on the board. And then, like I said, one of the youngest people that we've had on Columbus Can't Wait. So thank you for joining us. And just a little behind the scenes, he did go to Cos. I went to Centennial. I'm not gonna hold it against him. But
Cos is a really good school.
So I just have to interject here because not everybody's from Columbus, so not everybody knows what COS is. What's COS?
Cos is Columbus Alternative High School. It's one of the district's lottery schools that you can lottery into. And it has a just far more rigorous curriculum than some of our other schools do.
Okay. And
probably one of the most prestigious schools in Central Ohio.
oh yeah, I know. I mean, I know what it is because I when I went to OU, I met tons of people who went to COS, and I was always really impressed by them, just as people and just in class. Not everybody when you get to college has the ability to like critically think at the level that some of my friends who went to COS were thinking. And to be honest, many of them taught me a lot. So I'm really excited to have you on because I've always heard really good things about the school.
Yeah, and causes was like absolutely just fundamental to my early experience and helping me get to this point. Yeah, my life would be very different without cause.
That's amazing. One of my besties went to cause and he just graduated from Princeton. So
that's dope.
Don't say Columbus City Schools does not churn out really good folks. One of them sitting next to me and you and some other folks in the room. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I talk a lot of jokes about cause because I went to Centennial. It's that friendly rivalry between the best school in the city, Centennial, and Cos.
And the second best school in the city.
Cos. Yeah, you feel me? But truthfully, like Taria, some of my closest friends, they're graduates from Cos, and I do know that school does turn out really like dope people and everything. So
yeah,
I'll set aside my rivalry for today, for the next however long we're here potting. But as soon as the mics are off, we're going back at it.
Well, you obviously had a good experience there because you're wanting to stay engaged with the school district here in Columbus because you're running for office. So, like, I think What do we want to talk about first? You want to kind of talk about where you're from? Because we want to make
Yeah.
sure people get to know you. Because we want folks when they're going to the polls to feel like they know who they're voting for. So I saw you're from the West Side. Okay.
I grew up on the hilltop with my grandparents.
Okay.
I moved in with my grandparents when I was 1 year old, and I've lived there ever since.
Okay. It's nothing like being raised by like having grandparents like deeply involved in your life. I feel like you just are kind of like different, like whatever your grandparents do a lot of, like your mannerisms, all that
Yeah,
stuff is always like a
yes.
little older.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I see that kind of in me now, and it's kind of just interesting throughout the day to like pick out little pieces that I'm doing of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, shout out to them.
Before you came in, like we were talking a little bit about just like his upbringing and all that, and I mean I knew that you were younger because we interacted at the candidate forum, but I didn't know that you were 22.
Yeah.
And he was saying about how he didn't realize how young he was because he was just out living this life. Oh, you were here for that.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see it. Like, I think it's great that you're getting engaged so early. And I also think that like the opportunity to have representation from younger folks on we just saw Mitch McConnell. That was sad. We have a lot of older folks who are in government office, and we do not have enough representation across the age spectrum. So I am really happy to see you like getting engaged so early and running and like being brave enough to go ahead and go out there and do it. So I'm so excited to like see what you do now and as well in the future.
And that's one of the reasons I decided to run, is I felt like we needed the student perspective on the board. And when I was in high school interacting with board members and being an activist, which we can talk about this more later, I was kind of had that experience where like, okay, I talked to the existing board members at the time and they just didn't really understand just the challenges our students were facing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, that's what I was about to ask you, is that how did you transition from a student in Columbus City Schools to now being a candidate in Columbus City Schools?
So I was always like politically interested growing up. Like when Obama was elected, that was a very big thing for me. And even growing up, like I was always taught that, the mayor of Columbus was Michael B. Coleman and the mayor was black. And, the mayor looked like me. That was always just a very big thing in our house growing up. And then I think I was Obama like 3 or 4 years for Halloween. Yeah.
Did you do the voice and everything? Like
I kind of did, but I was the only kid wearing a suit on Halloween. Because like, what is the president where he wears a suit? So I was always just kind of politically interested, but I just kind of imagined that like, oh, I'd go to high school and then like go to college and like get an internship and then just like start working like in Congress or something. I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought. And then when Donald Trump was elected, I started to really just like go to rallies and protests, and that was like the very early days of the resist movement. I got involved with like Invisible and just all these different movements that were happening at the time. And then we had at CAUSE the Civic Education Leadership Academy, which was done by Dr. Tina Pierce, who's on the school board now. And so we spent like my sophomore year just learning about civics, how to influence government officials, how to leverage media, and just how to really be an activist. So the next year we decided that we were going to pick a project. We wanted something to work on to take all this knowledge we learned. And so we started looking around and we were like, oh, well, we're sitting in a building that's like falling apart. Like why, we were thinking about going out in the community and doing something, but we really just felt that we had something right there in our home that we could kind of tackle.
Yeah. So you mentioned the buildings, like, so you were a student, you graduated, you went to college, you came back. Like what things have you seen change since you graduated, and what have you seen not change that like you want to tackle if you are elected?
I think one thing that has changed is we've started to address kind of the maintenance backlog. And so like before, a boiler would break and we were just kind of, constantly, doing a patch fix, or like some of our boilers are so old, the like original companies that manufacture them are no longer around. And so those have started to be replaced. And so I feel like we're tackling a lot of the individual systems in our buildings that are broken, but the overall, a 100-year-old building is still a 100-year-old building unless you completely gut it and renovate it. So I guess the small problems are being addressed, but the bigger problem of what do we do about these really old buildings is still there. And every year, we're going to end up in a point where our 1970 buildings are as old as our like 1920, 1930 buildings right now. And I think that's when the problems were the cycle is just going to restart itself when we get those buildings to be really old.
You know, you just said something really like I think important or impactful. Talking about like age, it hits me in waves. We were talking a little bit earlier about like what my interns be saying about me, but it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that the 90s were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, because like if you're just kind of shifting the scale, I remember in the 2000s when I was in middle school and high school, you know, the 70s and the 80s were, you know, 30 years ago.
Because that's when you learned your perception of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like when we're talking about like the buildings and stuff getting older, I remember when the downtown high school was first built. Like I remember when it was first announced, like, oh, we're getting a new high school and all that. And it was earlier this season we were talking about it, and they were talking about, you know, the most recent building, and I was like, oh, you're talking about downtown high school? It's like, nah, that building is actually getting older now.
Yeah.
I was like, how is a new building getting older?
A lot of our new buildings are 20 years old kind of, or 15 years old.
And I think that kind of just like, I mean, if you look at our older, like our historic buildings and everything, like Cos, for example, or you know, some of the other ones around the city, like if these new buildings are now considered old or older, then what does that mean for like the buildings that have been around since like the 50s and 60s and
they're
70s?
really old now.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know, like generally, in a district that would be comparable to Columbus City, like how often buildings are supposed to undergo some type of like maintenance or renovation?
I mean, I'd say a lot of the problems we face here in Columbus City schools are not unique to us. They're problems that big urban school districts across the country face. Like I think if you go to Cleveland or Chicago or Pittsburgh, you're going to find a lot of the similar obstacles and challenges. And so I don't know what like the regular cadence is in other districts, but one of the things we've struggled with here in Columbus is we don't have like a capital improvement fund where we're always, you know, dedicated setting this revenue stream aside for buildings. So we always just kind of wait till the wheels start to fall off and then people start demanding a solution.
So would you say that like buildings, that is like your main like driving force and everything for why you want to be on the school board?
I mean, that was really what kind of got me interested in the school board, because to go back to when I was you know, after we spent that year learning civics, we decided to do a community conversation night, and we thought like, okay, you know, we get 20 people there, you know, community people that we all know, and then we get I was put in charge of the media at the time because I was an intern, so like I understood how to send out press releases and stuff, and I was like, okay, if I get maybe Columbus Underground there or like Columbus Free Press, like I'd be really happy, and like that would be a success. We ended up having I think over 100 people show up to that community conversation, and like every media outlet in Columbus. And so by having just a ton of people in the room and then also the media, we were able to kind of just give people a window into what was happening in our schools. Because a lot of people don't know, you know, if you just drop your kid off every day, you know, you might not go into the school building too often. And some of our parents just never enter a school building. And so that was just kind of what first got me interested and involved. But there are other challenges we have in the district that I really want to address. You know, literacy is a really big problem. A lot of our kids, I talk to our teachers, they tell me, oh, I hand the kids a book and like they don't know how to hold a book because they've never held a book and been asked to read or sat down and taught how to read. So there are definitely other literacy, graduation rates, are other things I want to address as a board member.
I just had like more of a granular question. So with the literacy issue, like, are you seeing the issue I know there's like a third grade promise test. So is that where parents in the district administrators are seeing like kids really faltering is during like that test?
I mean, that's kind of a bottleneck. It used to be the third grade reading guarantee.
Okay.
And so what Ohio Republicans in the State House said, third grade is really important for reading because that's when you go from reading more from a literal sense to reading comprehension. And when you really start to be able to break up text and analyze different things. Like now, you know, and that's can be really simple. Like, oh, blue is sad. Like he's, you know, blue scene is for a reason. But that is definitely a bottleneck for our students. But I think it really starts earlier, you know, when they're in kindergarten and first grade and second grade, teaching those fundamentals. And, you know, if you have 25 or, you know, kids in a kindergarten class and only one teacher, that's really difficult to get all the kids to where they need to be. So I would even say it bottlenecks in third grade, but it really starts kind of earlier.
Yeah. And we know COVID was not helpful with the
Right.
reading issue for students.
No, it was not. Definitely the biggest group impacted by COVID was definitely our students.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like even as you were just talking just now, you were like mentioning some of the laws and legislation that gets passed in the state house. Um, like I said, we have been exploring just all the different levels of local government over the course of this season, and some of the things that have been discussed previously, saying that a lot of the issues that are impacting our schools, like they really are things that are above the school board in terms of like the decisions that are made and the laws that are passed. And so I guess the question that I would be understanding what your priorities are, the way that you described them. If you were on the school board, like how would you go about attacking them or addressing them and trying to turn those problems into solutions?
I think the key is really just building relationships with your colleagues and with people throughout the community, and really listening to understand, not to respond. And I feel like that happens a lot in politics. People listen to respond rather than to really receive the information people are giving them. But you just have to really get to know people on that individual level and get to know like all their experiences and why their perception is what it is. And so that's kind of what my approach will be as a board member, is just trying to get to know my colleagues on a really personal level, and start to talk about things we agree on and maybe things we disagree on, and see how we can really move the needle for the students in the classroom.
Yeah.
How would you personally, I know that obviously teacher struck this past year. How would you work to sort of improve that relationship between, I know you have some like good endorsements from some teachers unions, but how would you continue sort of building that trust back up and building that relationship between the teachers union and the board?
I think it's really important to understand like what the core frustration is. So one of the choices our board has made over the last couple of years is we've chosen to create 100 new administrative positions, central office, that don't step foot in a school building, and all those positions pay over $100,000. And so, I think whereas I differ from maybe some of my colleagues, is they look at it as we have personal disagreements, or just the personalities that has kind of clashed between maybe our union partners and management or the board members. But I kind of look at it as like, no, these problems are very, these are choices they're upset with our school board for making. So I think the way you start to repair that is to really prioritize people in the classroom, really prioritize people that are educating students or directly supporting our students, like our good classified employees, our custodians, food service secretaries, people like that. So just really, we don't have a culture in the district that revolves around supporting central office, supporting people in the schools. Sometimes it really feels the other way around in Columbus City schools. So I think you have to really build a culture that says, if you're not in the classroom teaching someone, or you're not directly supporting someone who is, like, we need you to be supporting someone who is doing that. I don't know. Does that make sense? I feel like
It makes perfect sense. And I was going to say, someone just was telling me their child attends a school in the Columbus City School District. And they were just saying how there's so much support from the parents to the teachers, and why that makes it such a great school. Because I think sometimes we're so quick to, criticize teachers because they are like the first mode of attack is like you see a teacher and like you're the problem. But I don't think we always think about like that cyclical nature of like the board supporting the teachers, parents have to support the teachers, and the teachers need to have what they need in order for the kids to get what they need. So thank you for highlighting that. And it made perfect sense.
That's really the job of a school board, to get the resources together and to create the systems to allow people like our teachers and our students and our secretaries to be successful at their jobs. It's really, the way I look at it, as how can we provide these people who are the experts with the resources.
Yeah. So what do you, I know we talked about the relationship between like the board and the teachers union, but what do you think are some other barriers to teachers getting the support that they need to then support students?
One of the things I hear a lot is, as a district, we're not a good partner. So I hear the same story from organizations over and over again. And it's, we went down to the 270 East State Street and we had a big meeting with, deputy superintendent this, director of that, deputy of this, this and we talked about a partnership and they were interested and they expressed enthusiasm, and then we sent them an email follow-up and we never heard anything back. I've heard that similar story from so many different organizations, and sometimes it's even, other government entities like the Parks Department might want to support with a program, but as a district, we're not always the most receptive. And so building a culture to where we're not only actively looking for partnerships, but we're easy to partner with, because sometimes it is kind of like help me help you. Like I want to do this thing for you, but like you're not making it easy for me. So just building a culture that is accepting and open to partnerships and to having the more community people come into our schools is really vital to get the teachers the support they need.
Okay.
So I've been trying to think about how to word the question, because I want to make sure that like I'm being like precise with it, right? As again, one of the reasons why like we started this podcast is because I was like, I'm an invested person here in the city. Like I have a school-age child, Tria has a school-age child. I'm a product of Columbus City Schools, and
I didn't know y'all had kids.
You saw it?
I didn't know y'all had kids.
Oh yeah, but
School
parents.
age too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Elementary
I ain't
school.
like how you said that just now. Like, my God, I thought you would listen to understand. No, I'm joking.
Right. You got to look at our Instagram. We're not those parents that don't have any pictures of our kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, nah. Not at all.
No shade to nobody, but
It's like, yeah.
I do have my kid in my stories and on my on my.
I put my daughter on the billboard around the corner from here and there.
Yeah.
All right, I digress.
We could talk about them all day.
I just didn't know. Yeah.
And so I think that, well, one, with this podcast specifically, we have been trying to really get to the root of what exactly do these offices do? You feel me? And how can, it's easy to throw out platitudes, be like, hold your government officials accountable and, vote, make your voice count. So, all right, but what are you
accountable to what? Like,
Exactly.
what am
What
I
are you
holding? What are you supposed
do?
to be doing?
And so one of the things that was made clear to me, and please correct me if I'm repeating this wrong.
You know I will.
Jesus Christ, deltas, right? It was made clear to me that the school board is, I hope I'm not saying this wrong, not responsible necessarily for doing the governing across the district, but they are responsible for choosing the person that does the governing across the district. Is that accurate? Am I repeating that right?
To some people, yeah, like that is really accurate. That is the approach they take as board members, or that is their perspective. I take a little bit of a different perspective. Every board is going to be, some boards are really hands off and they're like, we hired you. Like, we did our job. Do your job now. And then some school boards are really too hands on and they're like, oh, let's change the bus schedule to this. It's like, we don't need you to do that. And so there's a balance between being really involved and not being involved. One of the reasons I did decide to run is because when I was in high school talking to board members, there was a total lack of ownership. They did not feel like it was their responsibility to be solution driven and to address these problems. It's one board member, the board president at the time, had said to me, can we cut that part out? I just want to say one board member because I don't want to put them on blast. Like,
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
my bad.
Yeah,
I don't want to put that.
No, that's fine.
It's okay.
Yeah, just start that sentence over.
Okay.
Right.
When I was in high school, one board member, when we were doing the community conversation and I was giving a tour of the building, said to me, Brandon, our job, we're like a company that's gone out of business. Our job is just to manage the long, slow decline of Columbus City schools. And so,
Jesus.
yeah, and that really, that was the day I said, I could do better than these people. So I told myself, I put in the back of my mind, if I ever am in the position where I might be able to run for the board, I want to do it because I think I can do better. So to go back to that original question, to some people, their approach is very hands-off, to whereas for other people like myself, we're electing these 7 people. We're placing the trust and confidence in these 7 people. And if you look at, school boards are unique because you don't have an executive and a legislative body. Like most levels of government, you have a mayor and a council, or a governor and a legislature. But with school boards, the superintendent is an employee. They're hired by the board. The board is the body that decides the direction of the district. That is the ultimate body that decides that. And so ideally, you have a board that is really really putting together a good vision for the district, and then is hiring a superintendent who's comparable to that vision. And as the superintendent should be administering the board policy, the board goals, the board budgetary priorities, and should be able to come up with plans to meet those goals, not the other way around, because a lot of times we've had here in Columbus a board that really is just happy to go along with whatever the superintendent decides. I always use the analogy, school boards hire a superintendent a lot of the times, and then they put them in the driver's seat, fall asleep in the back seat, and then the superintendent crashes the car, and the school board wakes up and is like, what did you do? Like, why'd you crash the car? It's like, you should have been in that passenger seat navigating, because that was your job as a board. And that's exactly what happened with the strike. The board fell asleep in the back seat, the superintendent crashed the car, and the board woke up upset that the car got crashed.
Well, and I think the way that you describe that, people who don't necessarily understand that piece can understand if you work for a nonprofit, if you work for a company, like you are accountable to a group of people generally, and you are supposed to carry out, the vision of those people who that vision is also coming from the stakeholders, which are the students and the parents. So, I think that was a great analogy. And I also think that what I hear you saying is you're not going to take what's handed to you and the status quo of what people have been doing for so long. You're going to say, like, what are my powers here? Like, what can I, enact with what I'm able to do? And then, go forth and do that.
Definitely, because one thing I hear a lot of the times when I talk to our more senior level staff in the district is, that's not the way we've done it. We've always done it like this, or, this is just the way we do it. And, quite frankly, the way we do it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the district. It doesn't work for our students. We've lost 4,000 students in the district since the start of the pandemic. And so I'm definitely more interested in new ways of doing things and new approaches, because the status quo just doesn't work for our students.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody that says to you, okay, these ideas, they sound good, and it's really easy to talk about what goes on inside the car from outside the car and everything, but you've never actually been inside the car.
You sound like my future colleagues.
I want to give you a chance to respond to it and everything, because what I can say from my own personal experience, and I try very hard, especially as it pertains to schools. Schools are very sensitive to me, just because of, some of my favorite people on this planet are the teachers who have taught me over the course of 31 years. I'll say that, because even when I graduated, they were still very much active in my life and whatnot. The schools that I graduated from, I go back to my alma maters often. Walk the hallways, and so much, like what you said, so much of who I am today is a product of who I was or who I became, like inside those hallways and everything. So it means a lot to me. And so I try to divorce my personal feelings from conversations about the school district in particular. Something I don't do for any other part of government and everything. But like, I'm just curious really to hear, like, both sides and everything, and hear how you would respond to somebody saying, like, oh, yeah, you just don't have the experience. You don't know how this thing works. Or it's cool to be a student, but once you get into these seats of power, you're going to make the same type of decisions that I'm making now, because, it's not just the way that things work, but this is the way that things have to work because of X, Y, and Z. Like, so what would you say back to that?
I think I was like kind of two different things. One, when I was a student activist in high school and we were working on buildings, we spent about a year just like going down to board meetings to speak, sending out different media releases whenever there was a problem at the building. And one thing I heard for an entire year is, Brandon, there's no more money for cause. You need to wait until we pass a levy. Well, 1 year into our advocacy and putting pressure on the board, suddenly they had $1.5 million for us. And then about a year or so later, they came back and said, well, here's $3 million more. And so when you put public pressure on people, it does encourage them to change their behavior and to act a little bit differently. And that was really the kind of big takeaway from that experience, is they might say no in February when you start asking them, but by next February, if you put public pressure and you've organized and you've made phone calls and you've been just really relentless, it does push people to change their behavior. It pushes, elected officials to change their behaviors. But then to that second piece, I think what we haven't had in the past is board member who really had a different perspective and also really worked to build a coalition, build a team. I don't want to just be one person on the school board. I don't want to fall in that 6 versus 1 dynamic or that 4 versus 3 dynamic. So I'm really just putting a lot of emphasis into building those relationships and those partnerships. That way, it's not just me saying we should do this differently. It's 4 board members saying we need to do this differently because the status quo just doesn't work.
Yeah, that was the next question I was about to ask. Sorry, I'm over here hogging the mic and everything, Tree. That's crazy. I ain't like how you said that. Just whatever. The next question I was gonna ask was, like, should you get elected and whatnot and going on to the board? Obviously, you would be one of 7, so there would be other people that you would be on the board with. What do you think that your working relationship will be like with, the people that you've been critical of and saying, oh, you should have did more?
I think it's going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult. Yeah. The board. Let me. I'm trying to decide how I want to answer this. I think it's going to be difficult, but I will say our board members, everyone is on the board for really the same fundamental reason. They want to improve the district. They want to move the district forward. That's why anyone would spend time, going to campaign events as a candidate all week. So everyone shares. There's not a difference in values between me and other board members. There's not a difference. There might be a difference in policy goals or beliefs or wants, or budgetary goals, beliefs or wants, but we're all trying to get to the same end goal and solution. So I think the challenge will be how to bridge that gap. And sometimes it might just be like a different in style. I might prefer to talk about issues in one way, and you might prefer to talk about issues in another way. And of course, anyone who's ever been an activist knows that how you message as an activist is just different than how you message as an elected official.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned coalition building. Like, you can also, be working on that with your colleagues as well once you're in that seat. And it sounds like you're interested in doing that because, as you said, it's not necessarily a difference in values. It's a difference in approach.
Yeah, definitely. And approach. And it is easy. It's easy to get swept up into the culture and into just like, the whatever the organizational culture of just this is how we've always done it. Like, that's a very and people get, kind of demoralized as time goes on. And so one thing I hope I am able to do is, energize some people in the community. People have told me that my campaign is refreshing in a way. I didn't really understand what people meant until recently. And so I think it's just about getting people motivated and trying to have that conversation about how can we both get to the goal that we want in the end place.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, how's it been running? I know before we started, can you say on the podcast about your new endorsement?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I was endorsed by the Franklin County Democratic Party last week. And so a lot of people might know the sample ballot or the slate card, but that means I will be on that to kind of connect that piece back to some of your listeners.
Okay.
I'm really...
Do you want me to talk about the other endorsements or...
I'm trying to decide if I want to ask him on camera or off camera about sample ballots. I'll ask you later, though.
You can go ahead and ask now.
All right, well, here we are. He said
Let's talk about it.
Him,
Let's
right?
talk about it. Yeah.
Being somebody
he knows what we're going to ask him.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. Let's, yeah.
I want to know, do you know for real? Like,
I mean, I kind of get where it's going. Yeah.
All right, I'll ask. And you tell me if this is where you thought I was going to go.
Okay.
As somebody that's actually endorsed on the sample ballot, do you feel like that is a fair and democratic way of going about like doing elections here in Franklin County? Like, I'm about to mess up your endorsement, bro. I tried to ask you on the question.
We've asked a lot of people who've come up here that same question.
The process is different for different races. And so for me, when I started running, no one was really interested in shaking things up on the board, at least, or at least no, that's not true. A lot of people were interested, but a lot of people were happy just to go along to get along, same old. And so it is because people like me stepped up and say, I think I can do a better job. I want to run, and then put a lot of time and work, called everybody, sent a letter to everybody, met with people relentlessly. And I'm not embarrassed to call people like 5, 6, 7 times. I'm just going to keep calling you till you call me back. And so I think for me, I feel like the process was very fair, but I know a lot of people do not feel like that. And I will also say, we have a very incumbent favored system here, and not just the United States, but especially here in Franklin County, to where if you're an incumbent, to some people that almost makes you entitled to the endorsement for your reelection campaign. But so I think it can be fair to people like me. It has been a very fair process, and it has worked out well. But to people who might want to run against an incumbent, or to people who are just political newcomers and just don't know people and don't have the literacy of politics, or even, a lot of people don't know there's an executive committee or a central committee. And so to those people, it definitely is a barrier.
So were there incumbents that didn't make it on the sample ballot because of your endorsement? The endorsement of you?
Yes, there's one. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm running against an incumbent. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. I'm just curious and everything. But my bad. Back to the original question though, just about how it's been for you, running. This is the first time you ran for any office, right? 22. So.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So how's it been?
For me, the bigger piece about running. And,
okay. How's it feel?
Yes.
This is the first time, bro. This is a milestone. I'm curious.
It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life, but also the most difficult. And so there's times where I don't want to talk to anybody else. I've already talked to 20 people, or I've gotten the same feedback 5 times in a day, and I kind of am tired of hearing it. I know it's something I need to move the campaign further along on something. But it is an interesting experience because you walk into when the Negro Women, the
UNCW.
Yes, when we did the event at the First Church of God, I walked into the registration table and I was like, oh no, I'm a candidate. People just don't expect a young person to be a candidate. And so it's a really interesting experience because you get to really just kind of challenge people's typical expectations of what it means to be a candidate.
Yeah.
And also I thought, when I first started running, I thought older people, everyday people, would be very resistant to a young candidate, because that's kind of the typical dynamic of, old people say young people are too inexperienced, and then young people
too
say
radical.
old people are out of touch. Right? That's just
I just need you to be specific about these old people, because you called
no,
us,
not you. Yes,
he ain't talking about me. So
what I learned,
I'm only as old as I feel.
Yeah, what I learned. When I started knocking on doors, it was the old people who are excited for young leadership here in Columbus. So when I knock on a door to get signatures, and I had a clipboard and they had gray hair, they'd snatch the clipboard right out my hand and yes, I'm so excited, I want to sign, we need more young people. And so that has just been a really warm and nurturing experience. I've also have kind of been embraced by a lot of the more typical establishment political figures, if you will. And so that was something I just didn't expect. Yeah, but I think that goes back to just the refreshing aspect of a lot of people are ready to see the district move forward, and know that the board in its current form just is not moving the district in the right direction.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you say to folks, just people in the community who are in the political establishment, when folks I think that people don't necessarily have the best perception of the district because of a lot of things. I mean, because of the performance of students on tests, or
elected officials, or
just the community. So for instance, I live in, Columbus City, and the first question that people would ask me is, well, are you sending your daughter to those schools? That's the first question. Or what are you going to do about schools? It's always just assuming that she is not going to attend Columbus City.
And that's
schools.
a big, I live in the city of Columbus, but in Hilliard City Schools. That's a big thing for people to, or Worthington City Schools, but City of Columbus. I feel like that's a very common thing for people to say in our community. And I want to change that. I want people to say, I moved here because it is Columbus City Schools, because Columbus City Schools is great, and that's where I want my kid to go. But I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, that was my question. What do you say to people who, have a negative perception of the district and feel like, things aren't going to change whether you run or not? It's just been like this for a really long time. That's what I hear all the time.
I'd say, one, we have the choice, because that is something, that narrative of, Columbus City schools suck because big urban schools suck. Big urban school districts suck, and that's just the way it is. One thing I've been really trying to push back on that, we do have a choice as a community. We have a choice whether we elect people who create 100 administrative positions or we hire 100 new teachers. So we do have choices as a community and how our schools are ran, and they can be better. And I would also say to those people is, really just have confidence and keep an open mind with the district. Because a lot of our students, charters are an option that a lot of our families choose to send kids to. I think we have maybe 20,000 kids that could go to Columbus City schools, but go to charter schools. I know there are different estimates about that, but I'd say just keep an open mind on the district. And we need your support as much as we need our board members to support our teachers as well.
Do you have examples of big urban school districts that you look to that you think, wow, I really want to see Columbus performing in that way?
I think a district like Kansas City has made a lot of just time and priority to putting resources in the classroom. Kansas City on the Kansas side of the border, but also like Houston has also, they've I don't know if you could say they've turned around the district, but they really took that approach of we're going to invest in the people in the classroom, and they've seen measurable differences move throughout their community.
So this is a serious question, a sober question. Do you think that the problems that Columbus City schools right now is facing, that any of it does go beyond the school board? Like the problem is actually more institutional, and
I'd say all of our problems really come from racism. If we really just break it down simple, yes. And so, but I'm not gonna let our board slide because all the problems bigger than just one board. Absolutely, a lot of our problems are 50 years in the making. However, as an elected official, you don't get to pick what challenges you deal with. Your job is to come up with a solution. So I'm not gonna let them off the hook on that one. But if you look at us as a district, 1974 we had 110,000 students. Today we have 46,000 students. That's and so crazy. White flight, suburbanization made possible by redlining, and then busing led to a decline of enrollment in Columbus City schools. And then fast forward from 1979, the first year we started busing, to the mid to late 90s with the rise of charter schools, which charter schools, you look at their student populations, they look like us. Charter schools are actively resegregating our schools. Schools are now more segregated today than they were at the time of desegregation in the or at least Brown versus Board of the 1950s. And every student that leaves the district, we have less money, and it's not a 1-to-1 ratio of that student leaves, all the costs go away. We're a big district. We have a lot of buildings. We have a lot of old buildings. We have a lot of staff. We have a lot of vehicles. The maintenance costs definitely stay up. So I will say our problems are bigger than one board, but it's up to all of those boards to confront those problems and to fix it and to start to move the needle in the right direction.
I just want to make some assumptions here though, because you mentioned, like, I'm gonna just take Houston for example. I feel like Houston, Texas, the district. Houston. I would just assume that Houston's a pretty black city, so they would be facing some of those same things in terms of racism, suburbanization, white flight, all of those things.
Yeah, urban sprawl for sure in Houston. Yeah,
and they're in Texas, Ohio. Very similar politically. Yeah. So if you're saying that you've seen a school like Houston make measurable changes, then it's possible in a city like Columbus.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Houston School District was taken over by the state of Texas after they made a lot of progress just very recently. But yeah, it is definitely possible. A lot of these things are choices. Do we have a board that chooses, I think the biggest job of a school board is to get more money into the district. And so our last levy was 2016. Our next levy might be on the ballot this year. That's a long time to go without an additional investment in Columbus City schools of the size that we really need. And so it is a choice. We could have put a ballot on in 2018 or a levy on the ballot in 2018. We could have put a levy on the ballot in 2020. Those were both really good years for policies Democrats like and support, but we didn't. And that's had a direct impact on what we're seeing in the classroom. So it's about choices to me. Do we choose to invest in those people in the classroom, or do we choose to invest in central office staff?
Okay.
Yeah. So I got a question. It's a little bit more about what we was talking about earlier. being a graduate from Columbus City Schools, you know, like the pride that people have
Mm-hmm.
in their high schools and their alma maters and whatnot. Some of the solutions that have been proposed to say that we need to consolidate, we need to have less schools so that we can have bigger populations inside the schools,
Mm-hmm.
more resources that are going towards them. And now that I want to know what your stance is on like closing schools and, well, yeah, just closing schools.
Yes. So we do have a lot of high schools that are, or some high schools that are around like 50 or 60% capacity. And I will be honest with people, it does not make a lot of sense to keep a building open, to keep two buildings open at 50% capacity if you could consolidate and save money. And people do have that passion is there with the high schools. You know, oh, I'm a Pegasus, or I'm a cowboy, or I'm this, or people that
Or a
passion.
star.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to leave y'all out, but
They always do, man. They always do.
Because they're kind of out
All
of
right,
the way.
okay, all right.
Think you're on the suburbs.
Jesus.
But yeah, so people do have those very strong emotional attachments. And what I would say to those people is, well, before I even talk to those people, it's our job as a board to be trusted and to have people's confidence, so people can be uncomfortable with the change we make and not be upset and be happy because we're seen in the community and we're present, and we've, you know, they know that the Columbus City School Board can do a good job at making this change. That's not the position we're in right now as a board or as a community. But I will also say to those people, kind of, if you want the best for our new students, for the students who are in the classroom right now and in the classroom 10 years from now, you're going to have to give up. You might have to give up that high school, that love for your high school. I'm sorry to say it, but you just might.
Sorry, Whetstone.
Yeah,
no,
let's be
you.
honest. If you went there 50 years ago, that's not your high school anymore. It's just not. I'm sorry, y'all. It's just not. It's been 50 years.
Listen,
yeah, things have changed.
People are attached to
that
their
passion. Yes,
that's a Cleveland thing. That's it's very much Cincinnati thing too. That people are attached to like their schools. Yeah. But my question to you would be like, you know, getting people to buy into that idea, like, okay, you may have to close some schools. I think, do you also think that it's part of it is like meeting people where they are? Because like, I know the district was doing certain things where, you know, they were inviting parents, inviting alumni, inviting all these people to come to meetings about, you know, buildings closing or building improvements. But I always feel like, okay, that sounds great in theory, but like, what are the other things that you can do to educate people, get feedback, all of those things in order to engage the community? So do you think that like the school district could do a better job with that, like more of like meeting folks where they are and the education standpoint?
You know, most of our elected officials do like office hours. Our school board members don't. Like a state rep is going to go sit at their local library for 4 hours Saturday morning and meet people. Our school board members don't really do that. When I was in high school, our school board members would go to like the Westmore Middle School band night or the Whetstone like band concert, or, you know, they'd be out and present in events, so they were constantly getting feedback. I don't see that as much now from our school board members. And so it is about being out and present in the community to get constantly being given feedback and information, so that then we can go learn like, oh, what are the gaps? Like, what do people not know that's happening in the district?
Yeah, I just have to say this because I couldn't believe it. So there was this thing that happened with, I'm just gonna say it, the superintendent, where she was like supposed to be meeting like parents or whatever in the community, but the old one. Okay. But it was like at a coffee shop that had like capacity for like 20 people, and it was at like 7:30 in the morning. And I was just thinking of the parent population. We know what the parent population is. We know what times like students are actually like going to school at that time. So I'm like, that has to get better. Like that is
7:30 parents are
AM.
Yeah, that's you know, most of our families they're putting, you know, backpacks together. They're like running around.
Breakfast.
Yeah, got to get the kids
things
to the bus stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, get off to work.
Yeah. And so I'm not here to minimize how hard it is, again, to meet people where they are, but I think that has to be like a core thing that happens.
There is a very big socioeconomic difference between a lot of our staff in the district and our students and our families. You know, most of our teachers do not live in the district. Most of our teachers do not look like our students. Our classified employees do. You know, those custodians, those bus drivers, truck drivers, secretaries, special ed, those people they are our students. They went to Columbus City Schools. They live in the district. And when I say they look like our students, I mean they're people of color. So they look just like our students. Our top level staff, They make a lot more money than most people do in this community. They don't always live in the district. And they live a different life than a lot of people do. I remember at the superintendent's forum a couple of weeks ago, before they selected the new superintendent, one of the questions is, what is your favorite place to vacation to? And I just thought, like, most of our families cannot afford to go take a nice vacation, to go get on a plane. And the answers were like Jamaica, and two people said Jamaica and one person said something else. And I don't blame them. You got to ask a question, you got to answer it. But like, that's that very big difference between, the people who are our top level staff just don't live lives like our families do. And so they probably it never occurred to them that they have a kid they need to get to school at 7:30. It just never, it probably went right over their head, because then that's the disconnect and that we see a lot of times in the district.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And powerful, I think.
Yeah, but no, 7:30 kids are going to school. Yeah.
Yeah. And even the vacation thing, we were taking my daughter on vacation, and I called the school and I said, well, we're going on vacation, so she's going to need to like be out for a couple of days. And they were like, what? And I was like, we're going on vacation. But you're right. Like, there are so many students who do not have the opportunity to go anywhere outside of Columbus, Ohio. And that needs to be understood, and it needs to be met with nuance.
Leave Linden or leave
They
the
may not
Hilltop
leave their neighborhood.
Yeah, they might not even,
They may not leave the east, west, north, or south side.
Alum Creek might be a really big new experience for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Alum Creek, that was one.
Yeah.
was another one.
Yeah, there's many students have never even seen Ohio State's campus, and it is in their city. And so that is the nuance that we need from people on the board and people within the district. So I just really appreciate you even saying that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hold you, man. Like, even though you're a cosmic scholar and everything, you for me, I'm really intrigued by the answers and stuff that you gave today.
Oh,
like, you've given me a lot to think about and stuff. You know what I mean? Just the way that you answered, because here on Columbus Can't Wait, that's one of the things we say is that you either do politics or politics do you. And, it's a choice to put yourself out in the spotlight, open yourself up for scrutiny and criticism, or, being blackballed, like if we're being honest and real about it. It takes a lot of courage. And I know this kind of like a buzzword to say these things. Oh, that's so courageous. But honestly, I think it is really admirable.
Thank you.
You deciding to take the step, and I mean, even you coming on, this show to talk about it. Cameras are rolling, like people will listen to this and everything.
And this will live forever.
Yeah. Everything does now on the internet.
You better keep that same energy.
Yep, as a board member.
Yeah, for the rest of your political career, because I feel like I'm very impressed by you.
Thank you.
And I've thoroughly enjoyed this interview, and I'm happy. I'm excited to see. I'm happy for what you're doing, for one, and I'm just excited to see what else you do going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I definitely agree. Let me ask you, just like as some final words and everything, and I'll ask you. Just, you were talking about coalition building and everything. I think that one of probably the most impactful strategies that I've heard, like especially on the local level, in terms of like seeking political power, is forming coalitions and building bonds and and working as units rather than just as individuals and whatnot. Are you linked up with anybody? Are you like a part of any movements and stuff here? I know you said you were an activist and everything.
Yeah, it's kind of harder now as a candidate, because candidates have a tendency to monopolize whatever space they're in. Or also, like, you tell someone you're running for, like, oh, like now they're interested and they, so it's a bit just kind of different now as a candidate. And I've always kind of like have dabbled in and out of different organizations, and it's like, oh, I will go to this event, but like I feel like sometimes I am like the main person in the or one of the main people in the organization, but I feel like I'm always just like, I will help you like do this project, or like we can go to this event together, or does that make sense? I don't feel like that answer was very good and made sense at all.
It made sense.
As I was saying it, I was like, this does not make sense.
Real politician over here. I understand.
No, I understood I do understand what you mean in terms of activism and kind of like meandering through different, because at some points there are tons of organizations to be active with, depending on what your cause is, and you could be part of like 3 different organizations or coalitions or all of those things and be active in different ways, but not necessarily be the leader. Like most movements now are so decentralized.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's kind of hard to say like, oh, I'm just part of this one thing, unless you're like heavily, involved or have like a position within that organization. So I think I understood what you meant by that.
And that's kind of what I was asking. And also, there's no wrong answer and stuff here. It's more so just saying like, is there any like, is this about Brandon as a candidate or Brandon as a part of a larger movement and everything? You get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. I think it is a larger movement. I've been thinking about wanting to run for school board for a really long time now. And I wouldn't say like I didn't plan, every step out because you can't do that. But I've at least put a lot of thought into it for years now. So I'm also kind of thinking like, what does the next 5 years look like? I live on the hilltop. I want to drive up and down Sullivan and Broad Street 30 years from now, and it looks exactly the same as it does today.
You
or
said
as
you
it did.
want it to look exactly?
I don't want it to.
I
don't want it to look,
yeah,
I don't want it to look exactly the same. And so I'm always kind of looking for people to help move the district forward. School board elections are every 2 years. So 2 years from now, we'll have a couple seats on the ballot, and there might be a need for, people who are interested and excited to move the district forward in a way that we haven't seen in a while. So I'm definitely am thinking like long term, how can I build together something that's more than just myself?
Well, in school boards, actually, it is like a national movement, particularly like in certain regions.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Where people are packing school boards to move their agendas.
Well,
like Moms for Liberty is doing
MAGA
that.
People, school boards, I feel like every government office or elected position is unimportant until it is. Like nobody cares like about a school board until like, oh, now the political climate we're in the past couple years, now everybody cares about school boards. But I'm glad you brought that up because conservatives or MAGA or I don't know, whatever, there's so many different labels or, people on the right, I guess you can say,
we know
they have organizations and apparatuses set up to target school board elections to get their people elected to school boards. We don't have that on as there isn't anything for black people designed to get black people elected to school boards. There isn't anything for people on the left designed to get like kind of a national approach. And so that is one, they are targeting school districts across the country, and we don't have anything comparable to really fight back.
Yeah, and so we need to consider that when we are upset, rightfully so, about many of the changes that are happening with curriculums and all of those things, because this is a concerted effort to erase, the history of Black folks, to erase, the contributions of, people of color and Black people, within education, to remove us from this whole thing. So yes, there is 100% a school board movement. So Malcolm asked the question but yeah,
I ain't want to lead them and everything.
Well, I did.
Yeah, clearly. That's all good.
So yeah, so thanks for answering that question too.
Like final words and everything, just for the people. Anything that we didn't ask you that you want them to know about you as a candidate?
I say my website is peopleforsimmons.com. I will be having a meet and greet coming up probably in September. So look out for that. My campaign team would be upset if I didn't mention my website or have some type of call to action.
Okay.
I would be upset. You better use this platform. You know what I'm saying?
And then what else should I say?
Do you have so what's your social media handles?
They're all like if you look up like Simmons in Columbus, like it will pop up. Yeah,
okay.
I got it set. So if you just my last name in Columbus, it should pop up. So Simmons in Columbus. But I guess I will just kind of close out and say elections are always about choices. I don't think they're about like candidate A or candidate B or even candidate 1 through 5 in this case. But they're really about the choice of do we want the district to move in the right direction or the wrong direction. We've lost 4,000 students since the start of the pandemic, 20,000 over the last 20 years. We have more central office staff than we've had in years and years and years, and that's not moving the needle for our students. So I'd just say to people, when you go to vote this year, think about, are you happy with the direction of the district, and do you feel like it's going in the right direction? Because that's really the choice we have as a community, is to make a change or just to continue to see the district get less and less and less students. What happens in 5,000 years or 5,000 years, Jesus. What happens in 5 years if we've lost another 5,000 students? Are we just going to keep losing students until the district is a tiny fraction of what it once was?
Wow.
And that's really my long-term concern is public education is really under attack, and we have to do our part in the district. We can't. Ohio Republicans don't give us enough money for public schools. They don't, but we can still do our part to make the district as best as it can be.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Brandon.
Yeah.
We've gotten a lot of insight into you as a person and your candidacy, and just really appreciate you coming on and
Thank you
and
guys for having me.
to
And
us.
I like this podcast too. It's a good
Thank
space
you.
here
I
too. And
appreciate
yeah,
you, man.
Thank you so
Shout out to
much.
State House
Yeah,
Studio.
shout out,
That
thank
is
you.
not
Yeah.
the State House, because they be on some nut.
No, yeah.
No, not the State House, but
Not
we're
the
right
State
there.
House. This is the State House now. You feel me?
I actually
Okay,
saw a
yeah.
politician on my way over.
Did you? Which
Yeah.
one?
I won't.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't
Thank you
say.
so much for
No,
joining us.
no one worth saying.
Oh, I don't know who that was. No, I'm
Oh,
joking.
Columbus can't wait.
Columbus can't wait.